is in here, you know, the town through the town manager and or the director of public works and the town finance office may provide payroll services and such other manager, you know, that makes sense because that's and or. But I feel like it needs to be looked at a little carefully just because I feel like it's weird to enter an agreement in an or, especially in that first one. It doesn't make that much sense to me, I guess, when it's an and or in that situation. But I think in our meeting, we had talked about making it specifically the town manager in the water sewer meeting. That's all. I just, and for this 1 year, but I don't know, maybe I'll default to David in that first one. You're entering an agreement on an or is, on an and or is kind of bizarre to me. And maybe I'm wrong.
Let me just add a little bit here. So this is a point of transition, right? So with the director of public works starting up, we talked about it the other night, how are we working through this 1 year? So the idea would be, you know, if you have only and, then you have both have to be present and signing. And that wasn't the point. The point was as this transition's working over months and as it's edging through, how do we just make it seamless and simple? And I think actually, at least from my read, they're all okay. Because we did discuss that and actually I went back through it and sort of thought through that, like, are we doubling up? And that wasn't the intent. The intent is, how do we not make it a hard line and make it a transition period? How do we work together? And as the director of public works sort of evolves and the position evolves, that whole area evolves, how do we make it seamless? So that was the thinking. And without getting caught up in odd circumstances that could happen, I think it works from my point of view.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I just kind of had I guess it was more of a legal question of that, maybe that first one, you know, maybe that first one should be an and if you're in an agreement. But
I don't want to have two people have to sign something.
Sure, fair enough. It's fine. I just wanted to bring it up.
Good point.
What's that?
I said you want to take your permit.
David Petranca, legal counsel for the Water and Sewer Commissions. I actually don't see that as a big deal as long as one person is signing. It covers it under that. I mean, and again, as it was explained, you know, it is transitionary, and the idea is you're not going to have both all the time, and eventually it will just be one or the other. So I think I'm not sure there is a legal ambiguity there, as long as we're able to check the box with someone is the thought. So I didn't see any others. That was the only one that was even close.
Yeah. So in other words, you're saying, I kind of agree on that opening paragraph. Maybe it should be and forget the or on that, since you really, everything else I think is kind of ambiguous. But
one more signature isn't going to harm anything.
No,
but
no, the agreement is what I'm saying.
Right. So
it's the town under Shoreham acting through its town manager and the director of public works. I don't think it's and or, it's for that, because it's, but anyway, that's, we'll leave that to you.
Yeah. I think it works in either scenario. At this point, it's a policy choice between the boards and the council. So there isn't a legal impediment. That's the point.
Thank you, David.
Any other comments from anybody? Public? Anyone?
Okay, hold on. So you're talking just about who signs this agreement. Is that what we're spending, bringing lawyers over for to talk about?
No, it was just
who's signing an agreement, because Mary, the town manager and the director of public works are both signing this agreement.
Yeah, I know, I saw that, and it's just the or, and I don't know, or in an agreement, when you're signing an agreement and the first thing says, you know, the town manager, or it's fine. And I kind of think I understand it after David's explanation. So
We take or out with a minimum of,
just,
we're both signing it.
My point of view is fine.
It's fine. I think it's fine.
Anybody comments on that? Anybody, any other comments on the agreement? Changes in the wording of the agreement? Anything? Move on to the next topic.
Do you want to vote?
Well, I think we all need to vote on that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I will then make a motion for the town council to accept the changes to the management agreement between the town of New Sham and the Water Commission and the Sewer Commission. Seconded by Sven. All those in favor? Keith?
Yes.
Sven?
Aye.
Martha?
I,
And I'm in favor. The motion will carry 4-0, 4-1 with the absence of Counselor Emmanuel.
Okay, I will make a motion that we approve the proposed changes to the town management agreement between the Black Island Water Commission and the New Sham Sewer Commission, as noted. All in favor? Okay.
Perfect. Susan, I see that, items on number may be taken in the order that the commission sees fit. Is there any reason, does anybody see any reason to switch these up? Or do you want to just go from 2 to 5 as they're listed? Doesn't matter, okay. Number 2, discussion of any major policy changes of the town council. Town council? Anybody have any discussion on any major policy changes?
I don't know whether it falls under the category of major policy changes, but I just have a question and actually met with John recently. Yeah, and the question is the catalyst for the question was sort of the recent conversations around expansion of storage, et cetera, at the water company. And sort of where the line is between planning for water supply and planning for the town, because they are, to me at least, on some level, intimately linked. And I have to say, I met with John last week, and it never ceases to amaze me and impress me. The kind of people we have in town who are so bright and engaged in thinking about this stuff. I really learned a lot. So, I hope that this kicks off a discussion about this. I think we should be working closely, and engaged on these water supply issues from the town's perspective. And I'm happy to take the time to do it, but it just seems, as the island grows and develops, water supply has the potential to be a limiting factor. And I think the town needs to engage, in some ways, it's sort of like, if you really sort of zoom out to the macro level, it's about what we want to be. What do we want? What do we want? How dense do we want things? How much water do we want used? To what extent does water become a limiting factor? All of those sorts of things, which are broader than, they're more community-wide issues and concerns.
Thank you, Keith. You guys have a study going on right now, right? About water usage?
Yeah, John Brunig, Water Superintendent. We have, there's 2 studies, and I listened to your meeting and I think it got a little confused. URI has, with money from the Water Resource Center and I believe the USGS, are kicking off a water use and availability study, which was last done in the late 90s by Ann Beeger. Very excellent study. If you ever want to know more geeky stuff about geology on Block Island, you can read it. It's you have to read it 20 times to understand it, which I'm about half there. So there's that study, and it won't be as comprehensive because the geology hasn't changed. It's more about, and I met with them this past week. They're on the island for the day, deploying some field instruments. And it's more about, it's a holistic, it's not just the water company. There's one large thing that's happened at the water company since 2000, since the Beeger study was done, And that's reverse osmosis and brackish water, and the deep wells that we draw from. That's one huge component that's changed, because the Viger study looks at drawing from Sands Pond and the water budget of Sands Pond, which we no longer use. So it's also looking at saltwater intrusion and the effects of sea level rise. A lot of the things that haven't, that are changing from the Viger study. Like I said, Black Island didn't get rearranged over the last 20 years, but they're looking at development, they're looking at sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, and then the big change of about half of your water over a given year, the source of that being changed as well, which changes obviously the study vastly. So there's that study that is getting kicked off. We're probably just going to be collecting data for a year, let alone, I mean, this is a 2 or 3, like by the time you have a completed report, you're looking at 2 or 3 years from my discussions with them. This is a long-term thing. I think it's going to be a great study, and I'm looking forward to working with them and having a complete study, but that's a holistic approach, right? That's, everything, the whole island, doing an island water budget essentially. So that would include the private wells and, everything, not just water company. So then there's another study that the water board has approved, which is more Jim Jeremia and myself doing a bunch of data crunching and looking at the existing footprint or boundaries of the water district. We have a lot of future services. We have a lot of lots that are undeveloped, and it's more what could be or what is the build out capacity of that boundary. We've also had this year people asking us to increase our boundaries, which we have denied because of our capacity issue. There's the airport was one of them, and then another hotel, but we had to say no because we didn't want to, reach out too far, and then it would be the wrong decision. So Jim and I are looking at this winter what the build out capacity is of our boundaries. Is this a commercial? How many commercial lots do we have? What's the potential? And it's really hard to really do that, because on a commercial lot, someone might build a house. They might build, they might want to build something larger. So it's difficult, but we're going to try. And then on the other side of that, what is our build out capacity? What would we need to do to meet that capacity? What are the engineering requirements to meet that capacity, or to come close to it? We might not be able to meet it just because of the limitations of space and at the water company acreage for new wells. I just can't come up with 8 new wells and snap my fingers, because there's septic tanks and other, you need 400-foot radius to have a public water supply. So you're looking at storage, raw water capacity, concentrate removal, and treatment capacity are the 4 areas. But how do you do that, and what is it going to cost? Is the first questions that we're asking. For instance, I'll have an immediate impact on the sewer plant, because if we're getting rid of our waste there, then maybe they need to expand. It's this ripple effect, because with reverse osmosis, just like any other water, you tend to have to waste off water. So those are 2 studies that are going on concurrently, and they're very different. One's looking at us, the water district. The other one's looking at the island more as a whole. For instance, one of the things I'm doing for them is getting all my meters, my meter data, and then they're going to use that to extrapolate what the private wells are doing. So you got a 4-bedroom house or a 3-bathroom house, and we're going to start averaging out the meter data. Now we have, thousands of houses. How many, so you're developing a water budget for the entire island is more of the goal of that study. So I hope you understand a little bit more about what the 2 studies are that are going on. Yeah, and both are very important, but both have different roles in all of this.
Thank you, Jan.
Okay, I don't begin to understand. And I don't begin to understand because I spend way too much time looking at real estate ads, looking at rental ads, looking at the number of bedrooms that are being rented. On one house, the number of sleeps up to 20, sleeps up to 16, sleeps up to 12. That's not in the water district. That, what to me is water, I don't want to use a bad word, but it just seems like outside, in the water district, you have some boundaries, you have some controls. Are we thinking about outside of it? And the, you know, having lots of water is all good and well, but I don't think people who are spending a whole, I don't want to sound like I'm going to sound, but I'm going to say it anyway. People who are spending a whole lot of money aren't really interested in turning the water tap off. And how do we address that? That's the big issue. I just have this feeling everybody's going to be focusing on your hair's on fire because a couple of people want to add some hotel rooms. And meanwhile, you've got these enormous houses with their swimming pools and their in-ground irrigation and all of these things that are just going to suck up the aquifer. And that's just kind of being, oh, we can't talk about that because I'm not really sure why we can't.
Well, I mean,
Nobody can get their head around it, I think.
we're also in a meeting with the water district. We're concerned about the water district, A, but B, that's what the URI study is more looking at. And none of us here have the technical capabilities to do it. I was very lucky that Dr. Tom Boving from URI approached me about this, and Valerie Preller, if you know her, she works at BME. She's also a student there getting her doctorate, I believe. She was the one really behind this. And that's more of what that study's looking at, is all the holistic approach of the whole island, creating a water budget for the entire island. It rains X amount here, how much water is retained, how much water is being used, how much water is going to the sewer plant and ending up from private wells and ending up, how much is going back into septic tanks. These are all the things that the URI study is looking at. Yes.
I guess my point was, when you talk about extrapolating out, when you're in the sewer district, and I think this is just human nature, and you get a bill for your sewer, your water every, however often the water bills come out. If you have a house with a well that you paid for and your water is pumped and the bill comes through the power bill, you know, is it something you're thinking about in the same way? And I just think I think that people are using more water outside of the district, and extrapolating out isn't going to give you an accurate number.
Well, it's just using the data that we have from metered flows within the water
I
district.
got that, John. I'm just saying.
Yeah, to try to gain, that's the only data point we have. If we had water meters in every house on Block Island, we could do that. But we're saying a typical, 2-bedroom or 4-bedroom that's rented in the summer, because I'm going to start putting names on these about rentals, because we know rentals use more than, year-round people. A year-rounder will use 2,000 to 3,000 maybe, throughout the whole year. But you see a rental house will use 15,000 maybe. So we're using those numbers as a basis. That's the only thing we have to go on, because that's the only data that we have. So we're trying to use the data that we have within the district to try to, I'd love to have water meters and I love data, but unfortunately we don't have that. So we're using the typical rental of a 4-bedroom that's, like you're talking about with 16 people to extrapolate out to, that's the only data points we have. So, but that's, a little bit beyond the fact here, but, because, we're in a water district meeting. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, Martha. And, and that's why I'm very involved. I've already spent a lot of time with this to try to come up with that. And I'm an integral part and cog in the water district is into the study, because I'm providing a lot of data. So, but it's beyond the boundaries of the water district also. And also, yeah, but I do agree with you that and I've talked with Marianne about this, the culture and I understand you're paying a lot of money to stay here. You're renting a $6,000, a week house or whatever. There is a lack of conservation And maybe we need to get back into that. And Marianne, have had a few conversations about, and that's a whole island thing, not just a water district thing, about not using as much water. But Mary and I have even talked about the irrigation systems. They use sometimes 5 times as much as your domestic water. We had one that used 77,000 gallons in a month. But I've never gotten noticed. I just find them, I've never even gotten noticed that these things exist. I just have literally driven by and they go, oh, I guess they have an irrigation system. Or I call them because their bill is huge and they go, oh, we put in an irrigation system. So there's a kind of, Mary and I talked about the lack of control on that possibly too. But it is a cultural shift with our tourists. Our islanders are great at it. But a cultural shift in the tourists that there's a finite resource here, I think is very important.
John, don't go anywhere. I have a feeling Sven has a question for you.
I think there's two. A couple of things. One, we're hitting on, well, both sewer and water, we're hitting on the reason we started the infrastructure committee. And it deals with power, it deals with roads, it's sort of capacity management, right? And the committee was started 5 months ago, or at least initiated a number of months ago. And another interesting one, and almost very similar, was when at least there was a request for a fairly major addition to power supply, and that one person didn't necessarily want to pay for it all. And so it would go to the power company, and that became a big discussion. Same, very similar situation. So I think there's clearly an important role of this infrastructure committee to try and bring everything together, at least, and keep it in check. I mean, obviously, you're going to be running water, your sewer, whatever it might be. Everybody's going to be having their own area. But I think we need to do everything we can to share that data as much as possible, because they're actually all fairly linked. If you want to say, obviously, power and water may not be literally linked, but they are of demand based and necessity. My one question would be, John, is there a way to get an early read on the aquifer or any kind of technology read? I think Martha brings up a talk that I've heard a lot about, which is irrigation, wasted water. Where is the aquifer? Some people say we're running out of water. Some people say we've got, going back to the old study, we've got lots of water. So it would be nice to get some early reads if there's any way to do that. I know it's 2.5 years long term. Is there any way to get something, at least a vision into where things stand, so that one can take some, I'll even say some interim steps of just putting, I'm making this up, but a moratorium on something, right? So that we try and maintain that aquifer level, or is that premature? It's early.
Let me jump in a little bit here. A couple of things. One is I had the privilege of working with Amy some years ago. She did a similar study in Jamestown. And believe it or not, John's right. John and I, whenever he comes in my office, we're constantly talking about this and constantly talking about water. And it's not just water associated with those that are in the water district. It has to be water all over the island. And yes, the aquifer may be plentiful, but that study was done some time ago, and it's great that we're updating it. What I can do is work with John and have them and meet with them a little early and start posing some of these questions. I think if you're going to look, I don't know if I would use moratorium as a word. I think there's some regulations and rules you can start adopting or looking into adopting. And a lot of it's education. What I found in another life, the education was the key. Because once we started educating people and letting people know something as simple as, and I'm sure John has one, there's like a little ruler and it has like these pinholes. And it shows you if you have a leak in the toilet, how big the leak is and what's going to happen, how much water that goes through. And it becomes, once you start seeing some of this and understanding this, or once you start discussing, if you look at some of the statistical information, they show that the average person uses between 80 to 100 gallons per day. So that's one person in one household. So when you start multiplying those numbers out, you start seeing the size of the numbers. So I think a big piece here is an education piece. And I think that's going to come over time. We're not going to get any of this solved today. I think we need some of the statistical information. And I think you start having some benchmarks and some workshops so you can start some of that dialogue with everyone. One of the things I did this past winter is, welcome to the island, and came up with something. I plan to expand that and start talking about some of these things with the water and some of our limitations on the resources we have here. The fact that folks thinks we have an endless aquifer, we may, but we may not, define what that means. These are all commodities that we all need, but we need to share them and use them strategically. And also that's beneficial to all that want to. I do not want folks that are renting homes not to be able to take their showers, but they need to understand it. And they need to understand some of the impacts that it could have. And all you need to do is have one person's well start to hiccup, and it's amazing how quickly that travels.
Thank you, Marion. Any other questions?
Can we get
comments?
back to the original question that I asked, which was about the line or the nexus between planning for the water company and planning that the town has to do for the island and what development's going to look like, et cetera. Because I think those two are highly linked, and I think we need to be engaged in that.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, I would like you guys, I wrote a letter, I usually write a summer recap and all that. I would appreciate if you guys, especially the last paragraph where I hit on some of these. I mean, I could read it out if you guys want to. But do you want me to read it out?
No.
No.
Yeah,
Yes, so
go
yes,
ahead.
no.
The audience. If any. In the unlikely case that somebody's actually listening, it might be a
Yeah,
good
well,
idea,
maybe
John.
it is, I don't know. But I feel like it's hitting on some of the topics. As I've stated over the past year, the water district is rounding the end of its available water capacity during the busy summer tourist season in July and August. The water district is at a crossroads to keep up with further commercial development within the water district. The need for town water is compounded by aging private wells that lie within the water district boundaries. The water district would need to invest in larger infrastructure if we need to keep up with the development over the next 2 to 5 years and beyond. The 4 major engineering components to increase water capacity is raw water supply, treatment capacity, storage capacity, and concentrate water/treatment capacity. The decisions to build out water infrastructure to meet increased demand are complex. There are large financial impacts to ratepayers as the infrastructure is only needed, and in parentheses, and revenue is only generated for the 2 high impact months of the year, while off-season demand remains the same. The decisions made by the water district could have a ripple effect in our small community with other strained resources and infrastructure. I've attended a planning board meeting this past winter to discuss these issues, attended it with Dylan, and Dylan, I think, would agree here, but felt like we didn't get anywhere close to the heart of the discussion. I would like to open more in-depth dialogue with town council, planning board, and other stakeholders as these decisions are being made and the effects it will have on the future of our community. And I think that's kind of what we're all talking about here. And I don't think we have the answers today at all. And I think Dylan would agree. We sat through a 4-hour planning board meeting. We were the last agenda, and they were. Well, the irony of it was so thick, though, because we're sitting through how many agenda items of increased development, but then we were the last people on the agenda, and no one wanted to talk about it because they had been in a meeting for 3 hours. But the irony was really thick, wasn't it? When you think about that meeting, now almost a year out. But no, they were bushed. They were done. And the irony was thick, is because no one wanted to talk about it. There was 3 outgoing members, so the new members knew nothing about it, but we didn't get anywhere close. It was a surface discussion. What does that look like for you guys? Do you want to put together a working group where we talk about this stuff regularly, or I'm thinking about the infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the infrastructure.
Matter of fact,
that meeting? I've never.
no, but it's a subgroup. It was in my report some time ago where it's a subgroup that we're meeting with. I met with John. The town plan is actively involved with this committee. So what we're going to do is we're meeting with, first was John, and then we'll meet with other folks. And right now, the first part of this group is trying to get statistical information and collect the data. So once we get the data, we'll start looking through that and going through that.
Statistical information and data are you looking for?
Mainly, just exactly what Johnny talked about, the water usage, the gallons, how it's gone over the past 5 years. What are we seeing? What are we seeing as trends and things of that nature?
Capacity wise,
Yeah.
production wise, just in that 2 to 5 year period, with some of the studies we're working with, some of the things that we as a water company and the sewer are working on as well. But that takes full time to do that. We're starting to work on it, but you can't snap your fingers again.
So does that, I'm sorry, does that mean that you as a water board have concluded that instead of somehow trying to encourage the rest of the town to limit growth, you're just gonna try and build up capacity to meet whatever gets approved?
I don't think that's a fair question at this point, because we're still working on what our options are.
Okay,
We're not trying to limit things, but you can't, at the same time, you can't just sell water capacity that you may not have. You have it 80% of the year, but those core 8 weeks, which is why we have such a huge infrastructure for and need that for such a short period of time, takes a lot to determine what is necessary, what is going to work, and how to manage it too.
I just want to paint a picture here for the shortness of this, and everyone understands it, but this is inherently the problem. The week after Labor Day, correct? And I needed all this stuff all summer. You're running on a knife's edge, right? Nothing can go wrong at the water facility and to make it work, right? And when it does, you need to fix it fast. I had 2 large hotels, the National Hotel and the Harborside, call me. You know, a day I was trying to take off with my brother and I'm running down the street in my Crocs trying to get their water on because they're an emergency standby. I still, the week after Labor Day, didn't really need much of my treatment capacity. This is 1 week after Labor Day. I had them on for 2 weeks. It was no problem for me. We didn't blink an eye at creating that water for the infrastructure that we had. We didn't even need to turn on one of our large treatment units. That is part of the issue here. That's 1 week after Labor Day. Two of the biggest users in the sewer district, probably the water district, because they are sewer customers. We metered their water. A week after Labor Day, no problem. If that were August, if that happened 2 weeks earlier, it would have been, the system would have been highly stressed. We do account for that. But it's just painting a picture of why this is so difficult. The week after Labor Day, not even blinking an eye to provide that water. And that inherently is part of the problem and the conundrum of Block Island. And it really weighs on the finances of it, you know, in the end too. And I feel like the broader picture is concerning of what the future of the island looks like, or what you want to look like if you start building out these bigger water infrastructure. And the second thing is the financial viability, where we also run on a knife's edge with, we barely make the finances work, the water and the sewer district, because we're only drawing revenue in for these few short months. But I am gravely concerned about the financial impacts, and I have worry that, the higher the cliff, the longer the fall. You build out, and then the sewer district ran into it in 2007 when they purchased a piece of land, and then, things didn't go right for the next few years, and it was not good for a handful of years. Really not good. You had the town paying the payroll. They were not solvent, and I do worry about those issues too. You go down a path and the finances just work now with our staffing levels, our debt service, everything. It just works. We just did this main replacement. We got a 45% grant, mind you. And then the taxpayers helped out with that. And I'm still getting questions of why did our infrastructure tax go up from my ratepayers, which they're like, hey, this is a lot of money, because we had to increase rates. So I do have heavy concerns about the finances, and that's why I say it's very complex, that you're changing the whole financial model of potentially the water district as well. So, but I'm not taking this decision lightly. It's not my decision. And this is what I've been saying all year. It's not my decision at all. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I don't think it needs to be made in a vacuum of the water district. And to Keith's point, I feel like it's a bigger, broader community discussion that needs to be had. And it can't just be a discussion that scratches the surface. It's very complex. It's not just one, it's multifaceted, and it includes a lot of different moving parts. And the finances really scare me, actually. That's one of the scariest, is that we go under because we did it and we said this was a good idea at the time. And then because you're only getting revenue for 65 days, that it really didn't work,
So to Keith's comment, the infrastructure group was formed a bit ago. It was a staff group, which we sort of, the council vote on. But maybe there's a need, or I guess my question to everybody is there a need to expand that and socialize it more outside? So whether, including power, roads, et cetera, because it's all, like I said before, it's not just water, even though that may be at the point of the spirit. And to begin that process so that with the power company, we're understanding what the strains are and the stresses are that are going to mount up, and especially since that part of town. Roads are the same thing. We now have some new paving going on, but for many years that's been good stress. And all of them have that financial edge that just described. So nobody's sitting with a whole lot of money. So I think maybe, Marianne, and Keith, I don't know if this is where you're going, is if there's a staff group, maybe there's a need to get that together more often, or make it more public, or get people involved more, get social, figure out how to make it a little bit more tangible.
Yeah, I think the infrastructure conversation is essential. I understand that, but there is a broader planning conversation that needs to be parallel track to this, in my opinion. Because if you're doing one and not the other, you're going to have people saying, "Well, how did that happen?" So not doing it thoughtfully, I think, in terms of community engagement, I think would be a mistake.
It's also been touched on by all of you, but your focus right now seems to be about water. And I'm just saying, I'm just saying at this particular meeting, but from our point of view, it's just as much sewer too. Okay, because honestly, you might want to be able to turn on the tap, but you also want to be able to flush that toilet. Okay.
And they're very connected.
And they're highly connected, and as we're also, Brad, your point of, I think soon we're going to be talking about incremental housing down near Ball Bryant Park, and that area, well, something you can't sort of deny is, how do you balance that out? And how do we get to our end? The key point of planning. So I think we need to figure out whether it's a planning board or an adjunct here or something.
We have an infrastructure, I forgot, I'm sorry. We do have an infrastructure group, and I did know about it. And I think it's important that they have an opportunity to do some gathering of information before we get into what ends up always being a quagmire of planning that doesn't get anywhere. I'm just frustrated because I've been hearing these same things for years. And we had a sewer moratorium in the 80s. And it was imposed because we hit the, was it 80% mark? And
On the what?
a sewer moratorium back in the 80s.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
And there were provisions for single-family houses and things like that. So that those are things we've done before. We can do it again. It's not rocket science. I just hate the idea of having a functioning group and making it more complicated before you get to a further point.
Anybody else have any comments? Have we kind of wrapped up 2, 3, 4, and 5 under this? That's kind of what I'm asking. I mean, if anybody else has any other comments, questions related to any of that.
So are we going to get regular reports from the infrastructure committee? Because I don't feel like we've settled anything here.
I'm sorry.
Who's on this
So
infrastructure?
you know, the staff, just so you know, the staff
If I
person
could
that's spearheading that with me is the town planner.
I understand.
Can you just refresh my memory on who and what group the
I don't have it
infrastructure?
with me.
What's the process? I mean, what happened at the last meeting? I'm just.
Well, the
curious.
meeting we had was with John, and we talked extensively about John, what's going on and stuff like that. Then we send him with marching orders as to what he needs to come back to. But it wasn't just water. We were starting to talk about roads and other things also. So we'll continue on that path. I haven't met with Dallas in a little while in that regard. So let me get her back on board with this and see if we can get it moving a little more quickly.
Can we have,
May I ask?
could we?
And I
Who's on
can,
the infrastructure committee?
I'm sorry?
I just was asking who is on this infrastructure.
It was
committee.
mainly staff. It was an internal staff committee.
Okay.
So, and I have all the names and everything. It's more utility driven. It also got into paving and road and stuff like that. So I didn't know we were going to get into the infrastructure committee today. Otherwise I'd have that file with me.
I mean, a good process for the infrastructure committee, maybe you meet with everybody and then your goal is to form a committee after you gather information, I'm assuming, correct?
I think the goal was to gather the information and take a look at that information from a planning perspective. And then go from there. This is not going to happen overnight. I mean, Brad's right. It's going to take some time to get this information.
Right. Could we also look, I remember back, was it 80s or 90s? Like, I think it was water or the town itself passed out shower heads that used used less water. I think every bathroom I've been in a personal home still has that sticker on the mirror that's about conservation. The Block Island sole source aquifer gave all that information. I think if we could just start working toward an education program.
The culture now is that when I walk into a new build is to have 2 shower heads on your head and then 2 body sprayers. I'm not kidding. And then have that on both sides. So one, I've been there, I've seen it.
I know.
So those don't fit into the culture has changed.
It's changed
So
a
I've
lot.
seen 8 shower heads in one shower before. So
I've seen many painting those bathrooms. I've seen a lot
I
of
know.
WTF toilets. His and her bidets. But they're out there
That's
and it uses
enough of
water.
that, but they may actually use less water, but that's a whole nother thing. I think John said there's a culture issue.
Yeah.
So to Keith's point, Marianne, maybe in November, can we have an update on infrastructure? Both the staff part of it, but then how does it start to link in and whether that's you or Chief Monahan or however that bridge is right now. Excuse me, keep together. Let's do that on the November agenda. Does that sound like a plan? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna try to get, then we can start to get it up and discuss and not tie up.
I do want to point out this is really difficult. And the fact on my end and my head spins because you're trying to get, Marion's the same way. You're trying to get the day-to-day done and it's so hard to try to get something like this together. And it does take a long time because it's difficult to, on my end, even to help with this URI study, you're caught in trying to finish up a water main project and trying to do this. And then you're trying to think about these other things and you have such a small staff. And wear so many hats. And I know that's part of the problem of looking to the future, just in Block Island in general, because all of us wear so many hats. Especially, I can just speak to Dylan and I and the things that we do. And it's very difficult for us to have the technical ability, first of all, to understand these issues. I'm a water superintendent. I'm not a planner. But also to have the time to sit down and actually deal with it when you're not having a problem or not having a staff shortage or when you're not actually operating the facility. And I know Marianne probably deals with the same thing on getting something like this off the ground can be very hard and very daunting when you're trying to deal with just keeping the place afloat. I just want to, patience is important. I feel like I just want to say that.
And possibly resources.
It's resources.
No, I mean, resources that, Amy, just the eyes popped up, no! But I mean, maybe, we have to figure out how to resource that, whether it's a grant or it's funding or it's outside, like the URI thing. I mean, so I think it's a combination. That's where the November meeting will help, at least start that dialogue at a more planning, less subject level and more infrastructure.
It's difficult.
Marion, is it realistic to start this in November? Is it realistic to schedule
I think it's going to be tonight, yes.
an update?
It's not going to be anything, it's not going to be a complete project, right?
That's kind of what I was getting at there. Yeah.
Getting in the ball.
That was like, right, yeah. Like, geez, that seems like it's
And just so we're clear, the infrastructure committees, one of the catalysts was when Champlain's was sold and everybody started looking at that area and roads and pedestrians and the sidewalk was being finished and water, because there was some demand or some requests and power. So I think it's very timely. Maybe a little late, but let's get it going.
Champlin's has its own power.
I know
So
they wanted to go to the power company and get power from them.
Yeah.
It was a big negotiation and they kept the generators.
I think they decided to keep their generators.
Because the power company basically said, pay for this infrastructure. And they said, no. Okay. So that's a way to manage that resource.
And that might be a decision in the water district.
Right.
These are all the things we're looking at. Yeah.
Does anybody have any more comments, questions, concerns? We have our marching orders. Marianne, we all good? Hearing none. Going once? Do we need a motion to adjourn or is there anything else to discuss this evening? All right, well, I guess I thank you so much, everybody. It's been a great conversation and we do have. Does Dylan have anything?
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
I have quite a bit to say in regard to all these issues. I look forward to being a part of the infrastructure meeting. I would say that one of the plain as day concerns I have is the lack of enthusiasm or attendance at many of these meetings. When we have water discussions, when we have sewer discussions, I see maybe 1 or 2 seats filled. You know, there's just not enough energy going to really put forth a productive discussion. So I think that, you know, utilizing YouTube, utilizing some of, I guess, a more collaborative approach, as we're finding today, is going to be very beneficial to meeting those ends that we want to see and really defining where we want to go as a town. And I think that's what's most important. So thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Motion to adjourn on the council? Seconded by Keith. All those in favor, Martha?
Aye.
Keith? Sven? I'm in favor. Our meeting. Thank you all. And
Thank you
thanks.
guys.
And thank you.
Members of stick around since we can't have our whole week. Ideally next week.
Yeah, next week. What works? Monday?